we interpret what you're seeing right now is 1856, so it's a little bit past the 1830s. And now the first generation of Schneiders have passed away, and now we just have the second generation and their children living in the home.
The first generation, did they speak English?
No, they did not. Yeah, just Pennsylvania German, so a German dialect, and they spoke that their entire life.
But Canada as a whole, besides Quebec, was speaking English widely, right? Like in Toronto, they're speaking English.
Yes. Now there are pockets of different communities that come, and this area is a little bit unique in the fact that they had a very large pocket of Pennsylvania German speakers. That being said, if you were in Berlin, which was the name for Kitchener at that time, there would be a mixture of both English-speaking and German-speaking individuals. But in this area, it was mostly German-speaking with a little bit of English-speaking mixed in.
So it's kind of like a Quebec, but for German.
Yes, yeah.
Like literally, it was that's basically what it was.
Absolutely, in a much smaller sense, but yeah, absolutely.
So when you're walking by the downtown street, King Street, you would be hearing German as you go by, they say, or kind of like English in public, German in the house? Or?
No, it was mostly German even outside. So businesses, they would have signs in German and then maybe smaller signs in English. There was newspapers. The local newspaper was, we had English ones, but we also had several German ones. There would be German programming and stuff like that at local events and things. It was mostly German. It wasn't until after, or leading up to, I suppose, the First World War when things started to change. Once the First World War came and the Germans were the enemy in that conflict.
With England.
With England, and of course Canada at that time, again, good British citizens. So
subjects.
Yeah, you've got it, absolutely.
Subjects,
So then all of a sudden, speaking German in public becomes frowned upon because you're promoting the enemy.
This was what, World War I or II?
World War I.
So Hitler, what was he? One or two?
World War II.
But the English started, and the Canadians started not like Germany since World War I.
Yes.
But who was behind that? Hitler wasn't there.
No, he wasn't there. It was well, that's a complicated thing, but the general understanding is that Germany was to blame. It's much more complicated than that, and there are other people involved. They kind of, in some ways, took all of the blame, which was a little unfair, but that was the number one blame was Germany.
And the Berliners, people from Pennsylvania Dutch, were they biased on any of this stuff, or were they neutral, or were they more for the English at that time, or what?
They were neutral. Any folks that came as part of that first wave of immigration from Pennsylvania, they were Mennonite in background, and Mennonite faith, by its very nature, they believe in pacifism, so they don't want to get involved with any local governments or in any violence. So wars, they were completely uninvolved. That became a bit of a problem in this area. Again, long story short, basically...
They didn't want to go to war either,
no.
Pick up weapons or anything?
You've got it. There were some folks that of course did go, and some of them dealt with their belief system by taking auxiliary positions, so digging trenches and stuff like that. It wasn't frontline combat, but there were a few exceptions as well. So local individuals that were Mennonite and that did fight in the front lines because of their personal feelings. But again, that's individual exceptions. As a whole, the community did not want to get involved.
No.
And that's been across the board. They didn't want to get involved with the War of 1812 either. They didn't want to get involved in the American Revolution. They're pacifists by nature.
Pacifist.
Yeah.
So Berlin and Kitchener has been a pacifist city?
I wouldn't say that, no.
How much would the Pennsylvanian Dutch culture have laid a cultural foundation for today's Kitchener? To make it different from London or Stratford or the rest of Ontario?
So, it's difficult to say, and there are people that...
Because I feel like Kitchener has a different vibe.
Oh, totally,
like,
absolutely.
Literally, a different vibe.
And it's not just the Pennsylvania Germans. They're very important, because without them, there's no settlement here. But I think in combination with the Pennsylvania Germans that come, there's also that wave of German immigration from Germany that comes, and they come because there's people here speaking German. In the 1820s and 30s, they start coming to this area because it's a German-speaking area. They can comfortably live here and speak German. There's other people that speak German in the streets, things like that. And they bring a lot of their culture as well. So early culture, if you're talking about early 1800s, absolutely. Foundation is 100% Pennsylvania German. But by the 1850s, 1860s, already the continental Germans outnumber the Pennsylvania Germans. So this becomes a very continental German town, I would argue, more than a Pennsylvania German town.
So I started just coming. What year was that when the Germans started to come? Like
1820s, it starts to trickle, 1830s.
1820s.
So that mostly, there's different reasons, but a major reason for that is the Industrial Revolution in Europe. It happens very rapidly, and the society isn't necessarily ready for it. So what happens is you have society takes a big shift to factory work and things like that, but depending on where you live, there's big pockets of poverty in Germany. So because of that poverty and people are looking for a change, coming over to North America has been an option for quite some time. And so then they start coming over here. And again, you have a new area that's settled by German-speaking individuals. So it's a new Germany. So like it's a way of thinking of it. It's like a new, exciting place.
So when did Kitchener turn not like in mainly English overlap with the English speech?
Well, so what happens is there's a few things that happen. One of the main things that starts the ball rolling is basically the area gets identified as the seat of local government. So this area gets picked, and because we are a British colony at that point, you have to speak English to hold office in a British colony. So all of a sudden you have people from neighboring communities and people from elsewhere start seeing the opportunities. If they come here, as they speak English, they can take these positions. So because all of a sudden now you have these government officials speaking English and more people are moving to this area that speak English, you start getting a really good mix. It's very good at cohabitating. There's no big issue. First World War happens, then all of a sudden
it's not good to speak German in Canada.
It's repressed. Some people change their last name to be less German because people are
from Müller to Miller.
Something like that. Yeah, absolutely. People are stigmatized. Even if like they are Pennsylvania Germans. And they haven't been, their family has not lived in Germany for generations because they have a German last name, because they have a German accent, because it's First World War. There's businesses that are boycotted. There's, all kinds of things. So people start distancing themselves from that. And of course, that's not very long between the First World War and the Second World War. And then there's other reasons why it's not great to be a German. Same reasons, but again, associated with different people. It's not great to be German culture in World War II either. So that's repressed in some ways as well. And then after the war, there's some uneasiness with that as well. It's not until the 1960s where proud German heritage really starts coming back. And that's actually a bigger Canadian-wide trend. In the 1960s, Canada's...
Multiculturalism by Trudeau would have been a scoop with it.
Absolutely. People's communities start looking at what makes us unique. Canada's 100 years old. What makes us unique? And every community is looking at what makes them special. And this community can look at the continental German background, and they can look at the Pennsylvania German background. 1960s isn't that far away from the Second World War. It's a much safer bet to go with the Pennsylvania Germans, and also they were here first, and they laid the foundation. So all of a sudden it becomes a Pennsylvania German heritage, so places start getting celebrated. This house, for instance, is recognized in the 1960s as a National Historic Site. A lot of interest starts getting put into this building, and all of a sudden...
So before it wasn't? Who was living here during all those years until when? 1960s?
1960s, yeah. So
what was happening here during that time?
Well, for 3 generations of Schneiders, from the beginning of the house, you have 3 generations that live in the house. First generation, he lives, farms, does whatever.
Farm is here?
Yeah, 448 acres.
But that disappeared recently. Or that was part of the Victoria Park, or what's the deal?
So 448 acres, it roughly lines up with, it goes all the way to King Street this way.
All the way to
all the way up to Sterling Avenue this way. All the way behind Queen Street, St. Mary's Hospital.
St. Mary's.
Sorry. And then Victoria.
Like to Patricia.
That's a good question.
One of those streets.
Yeah. So it's quite
beyond the railroad.
Yes, beyond the railroad.
Kind of a little beyond the railroad.
Absolutely.
All right.
So it's a big chunk of land. And the first Schneider, he doesn't really get rid of any property. Second Schneider, he gets rid of a little bit more, starts developing, because Berlin is growing quite rapidly, so they have close property to downtown. They can sell off some of that land. It's really not until the 3rd generation that he starts selling off a lot of the property. He sells off the majority of it. one of the last pieces that he holds onto is what we now call Victoria Park. At that time, the city was looking for a new park project.
Yeah.
And this was one of the biggest chunks of land that was left, so they approached Mr. Schneider. Interestingly enough, that was mostly swamp land, actually.
Swamp land.
So Mr. Schneider wasn't that upset about getting rid of it, so he sold it. He sold part of it and gave part of it to the city, and then they developed the park here. When he passed away...
So at that time it was just the property we see marked out here and Victoria Park.
You've got
or maybe the pathway to
and like
Victoria.
another little patch over here, but less important.
What, the patch with the garden?
No, a little further away. Yeah, he just kind of held on to a little patch. And then when he passed away, all that was left was basically what's left of the Sneider Haus property here. So he passes away, and at that time, his sons didn't want anything to do with the property.
No.
It was a rundown farmhouse. It was in a rough part of town.
What year was that?
It would have been 1912, I believe.
This was a rough part of town at that time?
Lots of factories over here, so a lot of smog and factory stuff coming this way. Yeah.
Carriages, horses.
Oh yeah.
Or cars at that time.
There were cars, not too many, mostly horses still, but it was mostly the smoke and stuff in the factory, and it was just an aging house. So what happened was it was actually sold outside of the family. There was a gentleman who purchased the property and ended up duplexing the house. So he took this wall here and made it solid, and he rented out both halves of the house.
This wall?
Yep.
He made it solid? What do you mean?
So this was one unit, and then there was another front door.
My things are safe there. I can leave my bags there.
Oh yeah, it's just you. It's just us and them.
All right.
And then this was a door there at one point. This window here.
This was a door. So there's two houses.
Two houses.
Like independent houses.
Yeah.
That's why the Schneiders had it.
They didn't own it at that time. It was another person who bought the house and did that to it. So he rented it out to other people, other families that came through.
So originally, what was it like? There wasn't this wall.
Oh, it was here, but just like what we're showing.
With this door.
No, yeah, with this door. And
so there was. So this is more original to the original one.
You've got it. So when he duplexed the house, he rented it out for over a decade, and then there was actually